Welcome to SBS News in Easy English. I'm Amy Hall. Opposition leader Anthony Albanese says the federal government hasn't done enough to prepare for or respond to emergencies and natural disasters. Mr Albanese says Labor will introduce a disaster-ready fund if it wins this year's federal election. He says the current government's Emergency Response Fund has failed to deliver.
We would, with our Disaster Ready Fund, commit up to $200 million each and every year for projects that will make a difference in terms of mitigation, that will prepare for disasters, be they fires or floods or cyclones or other natural disasters.
Another 29 people with COVID-19 have died in New South Wales. The state has seen a slight fall in the number of people in hospital with the virus, now at 2,722, with a further 17,316 new positive test results recorded. Some 4.9 million rapid antigen tests have been sent to 80% of New South Wales schools ahead of the return to classrooms next week. Premier Dominic Perrottet says it's part of his government's promise to keep children safe.
I know many parents are anxious, but it's incredibly important, as we've said numerous times, for our children's educational outcomes, mental health and social outcomes to be back in the classroom.
Meanwhile, healthcare workers are holding a protest outside Sydney's Liverpool Hospital. It was one of the hospitals worst hit by last year's COVID-19 outbreaks. Nurses are calling for the government to provide better resources, with concerns there aren't enough staff to provide care for patients. ICU nurse Laura O'Connell says the last 2 years have been exhausting.
We got into nursing because we love caring for people, and we've got to this point where we actually can't care for people safely, and that's scary. That's really scary, going to work each day not knowing what you're going to confront.
Victoria has announced temporary COVID-19 vaccination clinics will be set up in 30 primary schools as on-site learning resumes from next week. Almost 37% of Victorian children aged 5 to 11 have now had at least one dose of a vaccine. The state has recorded another 15 COVID-related deaths, with a slight drop in hospitalisations. Premier Daniel Andrews says 4 of Victoria's state-run vaccination clinics will also accept walk-in appointments for children.
We all know, particularly as we push towards the first day of school, back term, day one, term one, there's still every reason to go and get our kids vaccinated and begin the journey.
A new survey shows a quarter of Australians have little to no knowledge of the Holocaust, while more than 70% know nothing about the country's connections to the tragic event. The survey found that 24% of Australians aged 18 and over had little or no knowledge of the Holocaust, while that number rose to 30% for millennials. Lead researcher Stephen Cook says the results show the need for better national education about the Holocaust.
We need to acknowledge that the Holocaust is part of our story. This is the story of people in our street. This is the story of the decisions that our governments have made over time. So this is a really important part of the Australian story.
And the 2022 Australian of the Year, Dylan Alcott, is hoping to claim his 8th Australian Open title in his last tournament before retiring. He will play the Netherlands' Sam Schroeder in the wheelchair final this afternoon. On court ahead of him are Australian men's doubles semi-finalists Nick Kyrgios and Thanasi Kokkinakis. I'm Amy Hall. This is SBS News in easy English.